thanks. Like, hey, Scoob, did you hear Nikki Blake is hosting a Scooby-Doo panel? No. Yeah. Like on today's Scooby-Doo episode, Scooby-Doo and Shaggy meet Nikki Blake. Yeah, and a Scooby Panel. Like, we need to get this puppy started. Okay, Nikki Blake, take it away, Scooby-Doo.
Welcome to the Scooby Panel. I'm Nikki Blake, your host from ScoobyAddicts.com, and today we're going to be discussing the Scooby-Doo Podcasts. I'm joined by a bunch of the podcast hosts, so before we begin, I would like you guys to introduce yourselves, and Derek and Shannon, we'll start with you.
Okay. Hi, my name is Derek Queen.
I'm Shannon Downey.
And we are the co-hosts for That Groovy Scoobcast.
Nice. Alexa.
I'm Alexa LAWLOR, and I host the Unmasked History of Scooby-Doo.
And Mike?
I'm Mike JOZIC, and I am the host of a podcast named Scooby-Doo.
And JayBee and Millie?
Yes, I'm JayBee.
And I'm Millie.
And we are co-hosts of the Smash or Pass podcast, which sounds a lot less weird when you consider that our third co-host is called Smash on the Internet.
Awesome. Thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it. I'm excited to talk about the podcast because I feel like people just kind of assume that the podcasts just kind of show up and there's not a lot of work that goes into it. And that was one of the things that I wanted to talk about at some point is really how much work goes into creating a podcast and what, you know, we do or to make them happen. But before we do that, I would like to talk about your relationship to Scooby-Doo. Mike, let's start with you. Are you a fan? Did you just kind of decide that it was a good topic? What is your relationship with Scooby?
Well, the way I first came into contact with Scooby was watching it on Saturday mornings. I've discussed this in various forums at various times. Basically, I probably came in with the new Scooby-Doo movies considering my age. But I mean, as we all know, the show has been in constant repeats since 1971, 72, or some form of it has been in repeats. New episodes being produced, old shows being rerun. So kind of had, I guess, a mixed bag of Where Are You, plus the new Scooby-Doo movies, Scooby-Doo show. I distinctly remember watching Scrappy Saturday morning with a bowl of cereal. So it was just always something that was in the background, and I've always just really kind of dug the concept, and it just never went away. And I think part of not going away and just always kind of being there in your peripheral vision, like even if you're not actively engaging with it, it's comforting. It's always there. And then, you know, in the 90s with the bumpers and stuff and the Scooby-Doo Project and Night of Living Doo and these guys and ladies at Adult Swim who are basically taking all these like legacy characters and having fun with them and being irreverent, but also like really respectful at the same time. And then Zombie Island, and I mean, it just keeps going from there. So it's just always been in my life, and it's a format that I enjoy. It's a concept I enjoy, like the characters. And as for the podcast, speaking of Zombie Island, I was watching Zombie Island one day and just thinking about how it was kind of the reboot for the franchise. Essentially, there'd been kind of a dearth of Scooby material for almost a decade. I think maybe Boo Brothers and Ghoul School were kind of in there, but like nothing, or maybe Arabian Nights. Can't remember my timeline there, but it was not necessarily great stuff and not necessarily consistent stuff. And then Zombie Island comes along and it's kind of a game changer, and Warner Brothers has basically made at least one direct-to-video film a year since that film came out. So I'm thinking, what's the background of this? What's the history of this? I want to know, you know, what the genesis of it was. And I went online immediately after finishing it, and there was like nothing. There was so little out there of any sort of substance. And a professor of mine once said that if something doesn't exist, then I guess you have to make it. And I wanted to ask questions, and the only way to ask questions was to have a forum. And I didn't want to start a Scooby-Doo podcast, but it was, I have another podcast, a film podcast, and I had another podcast in development that I was looking forward to doing. And the Scooby thing was just, it was burning away. And I started reaching out to people initially involved with Zombie Island, and that was kind of how the podcast kicked off. And then it just sort of continued on with creating an oral history of the franchise. And yeah, I think that's the story.
Awesome. JayBee and Millie, what is your relationship to Scooby-Doo and the inspiration for your podcast?
So I guess growing up, we just both loved watching Scooby-Doo. JayBee especially. My parents didn't really like animated TV shows. They just never enjoyed them. So I had to fight to get Scooby on the TV a little bit more than JayBee did. And then when my nieces and nephews were born, I tried to use them as an excuse, like, oh, well, I need to watch it for them as well. So it has to be on the TV now. There's no choice. But they didn't catch on to it as much as I wanted them to. So I guess I kind of fell behind with Scooby for a few years. JayBee did as well, I think. And then when we met, we were like looking through our DVD collections and we saw that we had quite a lot in common, and a lot of them were Scooby-Doo ones. So we're like, okay, well, if we both like that, we've both not had anybody to watch these with for so long, let's start watching them again together. And we just refound our love for Scooby. And then we met our co-host Smash, and JayBee kind of came up with a podcast concept.
Yeah, well, it was just kind of born from the idea that we'd invited them on our original podcast, 5-Star Talk, and they just had so much to say about it. And I was like, oh my gosh, I really want to go through like this nostalgia trip, and I want to catch up on the movies that we kind of missed. I'm pretty sure it was from, I want to say, Goblin King all the way up until Sword on the Scoob. And I was like, but I kind of want to do it right. So I kind of want my like Scooby expert there with me, and then just turn that into a show that people can listen to.
And then I think along the way with that, we started collecting Scooby as well. JayBee especially likes to find things online and research things online. So he started doing that as well.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Alexa, how about you? What is your relationship to Scooby and the inspiration for starting your podcast?
I think my first experience with Scooby was coming across a VHS tape that my brother had. And my brother and I have quite a large age difference of 18 years. So that he had gotten it, and I can't remember when the tape came out, but that was my first experience, and just immediately fell in love with it. And my parents were just like, oh, well, I guess we'll buy some more of these. And it just turned into something that I absolutely loved and have followed for my entire life. And growing up, I always liked watching the behind the scenes things, like on the Cyber Chase VHS tape is one that comes to mind. And then like the special featurettes on like the Ultimate Fans and things like that. So when I got my degree in journalism, I thought that, why not take the experience from school and start a podcast?
Nice. And Derek and Shannon, your relationship to Scooby and the inspiration for starting your podcast.
So for me, I've been a Scooby-Doo fan most of my life. I was probably about 4 or 5 when my parents decorated my bedroom in Scooby-Doo, and that never really went away. I don't know with you when you started Scooby-Doo.
I mean, I watched it as a kid, and then I kind of put it down, and then we became friends in high school, and he was always into it. So
yeah.
So I was kind of around for the ride.
I started a blog on Tumblr, my Do Central blog, right after I finished high school, and got really into it, started meeting other Scooby-Doo fans and stuff. And when I was finishing college, I started listening to a bunch of Scooby-Doo podcasts, like What's With You Scooby-Doo. I listened to Mike's podcast and Scooby-Doo's or Scooby-Don'ts, and I'm like, that just seems like the next logical step for what I'm already kind of doing anyway with like comic book reviews and stuff on my blog. So I tapped Shannon and was like, hey, do you want to do this with me? And we attempted one actually before that Groovy Scoobcast. It was called Crystal Cove Radio.
It flunked.
Yeah, we were not organized. We were not at all prepared for it. And then a few months after college was done, that's when we actually got sat down, figured out a format, got the proper mic. We didn't even have a good mic. It was really bad. And that's just kind of how it all started for us.
And Crystal Cove Radio, was that similar to what you're currently doing or totally different?
It was a similar format.
Yeah.
I think it was still going to do the whole jumping from series to series and randomizing. I don't remember how fleshed out it was though. No. I know that we were doing them while we were recording while we were watching it.
Our initial, I think what we kind of wanted it to be, but we couldn't do it, was when people are playing video games and they have the screen there, and we kind of wanted something like that.
Like a live reaction to what we're watching.
And we didn't know how to do that.
We did do 2 episodes though. Yeah. I mean, we did do, they're gone now. You will never find them. God forbid, but
clean that right up.
Yeah. And once we got that group of Scoobcast going and we liked how we did it, we just stuck to it.
Yeah, nice. So let's talk about the difficulties of doing a podcast. For me, Scooby Panel is more of a web series, but I have turned it into a podcast, and I'm not going to say I'm a podcaster by any means because I really have no idea what I'm doing. But when I do the web series, I'm trying to add visuals into it to make it more interesting, so you're not just looking at 5 faces talking. And the panel that I put out today, the Daphne panel, was probably 20 hours of editing just to put visuals in. That didn't include the 3.5 hours it took us to record it, and the hours of putting it from one computer to another and uploading it and everything. I think people don't really realize what goes into making a podcast or a web series. And, for you guys, what's the most difficult part of making your podcast? JayBee and Melly, let's start with you.
I guess for us, it's just a case of time differences for starters. Because our co-host Ashton is in America and obviously we're in the United Kingdom. So quite often it's a case where sometimes, at least at the start, it's a lot more organized now. We were kind of getting times wrong. There was this weird thing that happens here where it's not just GMT, but it's GMT +1. So at the start, we thought that we'd arrange the perfect time to do things. And we messaged Ashton oh my gosh, are you ready? Can we are you ready to record? And they were oh my gosh, I thought we had an hour left. What's going on? And I was oh, well, that's a bit complicated. I don't know how this worked. But I guess now it's times that we can physically record.
Yeah, I think a big thing is they are 7 or 8 hours behind us. And and then obviously they need to finish work first. So by the time we start recording, it's midnight for us. And I think our longest podcast is about 3 hours, which takes us to 3 a.m. and we're at work at 9 the next day. So time-wise, that's definitely got to be the most difficult part, I think.
Yeah, and that was, I guess, all right when we were students, because we can't record at all during the daytime because no one really understands what we're doing. No one knows that we do the channel. No one knows that we do podcasts or anything. So from 9 a.m. to literally 10:30, 11 at night is we can't record throughout those times either. So even if we were to get some more time on our plate, it's just not available. So that's kind of the main logistic difficulty, right? Everything else is kind of fun. It's nice.
Derek and Shannon, what's the most difficult part of doing your podcast?
I would say for us, just because Shannon and I are really, really busy people. At one point you were doing 2 jobs. Mm-hmm. Now I'm currently doing 2 jobs. So sometimes it's not necessarily having the time to record because we're best friends, we hang out all the time, but actually setting our mind to just doing the podcast and then the time that goes into the editing, I'm just not always mentally there to do it. Sometimes I'm just exhausted. Other times I just simply don't have the time, and that's what causes our podcast to sometimes just be inconsistent with hiatuses and all that, which we hate to do, but sometimes it does happen for us. I would say like when we first started doing it, what was difficult for me was learning how to do it. Like I had no prior experience really to audio editing or RSS feed. Like I didn't know anything. I had to do a lot of research on it before we started ours. I think it's like probably just the most difficult part is just devoting the time. It's just the time because it's a fun hobby. We love it.
Oh yeah, and like sometimes we'll get together and we'll want to watch Scooby-Doo, but then it's like this almost sometimes feels like a job, although we love the job. But so it's like sometimes it's like, okay, can we just get together and like not talk about it? Like, can we just sit in silence and like watch something that we both love?
Literally
and like
watch anything else. And we're binging like 2 shows right now other than Scooby-Doo. So
then it's like we get together and we're like, okay, do we want to like hang out or do we want to record and like do the job?
Yeah.
It is very time consuming and it does feel like another job. I mean, you know, like I said, it took me 20 hours to at least 20 hours just to edit the panel. And I work 40 hours a week. So if I didn't have off this week from work, it probably would not have gone out today because I literally finished editing it yesterday and then uploaded it.
The longest one we do is once a season, we do a movie and that's the long one. It's like,
yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have a tendency to record for 3.5 to 4 hours. And the Daphne panel was actually almost 4 hours, but the first 45 minutes of it was technical issues. And the last like hour and a half was just us talking about nothing. So, yeah.
Love that.
Alexa, what is the hardest part of doing the podcast for you?
Oh, I think in addition to what everyone else has said already, I really love the editing process, but sometimes I'll have like a super specific question like, okay, so, you know, maybe this happened in the interview and I want to shorten it or whatever. But if I have a super specific question, I don't exactly know how to find that solution. So sometimes it's like hours go into it, just like playing around in the editing program. Like, okay, so maybe this kind of worked. Maybe this is the best way to do it. And like sometimes Googling to figure out like, okay, so this is my problem. How do I fix it? So that takes up a lot of my editing time because tend to be a bit of a perfectionist with my audio quality because that's like one thing that I value really highly. So it's always just a matter of like that time in the editing to try and make it the best that I can.
And Mike, what about you? The most difficult part of doing the podcast?
Very similar to everyone else. I think I'd like to add to both yours and Derek's comments about the job, it being like a job. It's a job that doesn't pay for most of us, if not all of us, which is one of the difficulties. I mean, if there was income coming in from it, I would make the time and it would just be something you do, just like you make the time to go to your job. But because this is something we all kind of do out of love and it's something that we do in our spare time around everything else that's kind of going on in our lives, that does make it a bit of a struggle. And it's kind of a perfect storm of the editing, because it's, for any decently produced audio podcast, it's about 2 hours for every 30 minutes of audio and of work, 2 hours of work for every 30 hours of listening audio. And, you know, when you think most of us are kind of producing an hour or more of content, and that's not including, you know, interview times or recording times, scheduling with other people, plus combating, you know, are you a weekly podcast? Are you a monthly podcast? Do you want to be a weekly podcast or a monthly podcast? And just juggling all of those things and trying to make them all kind of work together with trying to put together quality content. And it's a lot of balls in the air and it can burn you out, and hiatuses are a thing.
We've experienced burnout too. Sometimes it's just we genuinely don't want to work on it, and it sucks.
Yeah. And that's where if it was a job that paid, it's like it doesn't matter if you don't like it. there's a schedule, there's a, you know, there's expectations, there's whatever, but when it's something you're doing out of love, if you're not loving it, it's hard to pull that out of you. So, and I think for me, like October, between my Scooby podcast and my other podcast, I produced something like 40 odd hours of content. So then if you think 2 hours for every half hour, and that's on top of like my life, and it burnt me out on audio editing. And I have like a half a dozen interviews that have been conducted and are just sitting on my hard drive, some of them up to a year old, and they're just not out there because it's just the burnout.
Yeah, I agree. I have a handful just sitting there like waiting.
Now, all of you have other jobs, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Which makes it really hard because, you know, if you're working another job, whether it's 20 hours a week, 40 hours a week or more, you know, you're still away from being able to do anything Scooby related because you have to work. Then if you have, you know, spouse, kids, you know, significant other, whatever, or you just have other things that you like to do, you know, then that's more time that you're not working on the podcast. And it can be hard to get into it. Like the Scooby panels have been typically anywhere from an hour and a half to 3.5 hours edited. So there's so much more of that people don't see or hear. And it does take a really long time to edit. About how long do you guys try to keep your episodes, and approximately how long would that take you to edit? Alexa?
Ooh, my episodes fluctuate so much, anywhere from like 20 minutes to 2.5, 3 hours. So depending on what type of episode I'm editing, it can take anywhere from like a full day to like I don't know exactly. I haven't sat down and done an episode in so long that it's like thinking back to it, it's like, it takes me a really long time. Because in addition to editing the episode, I like to do a transcript for people that maybe can't listen to it, and that takes up so much extra time as well, because I'm really picky with putting it through transcription services. So usually I'll just like manually type out a lot of it, because it's like you try and put Scooby-Doo through a transcription service and it's like, what is that? Like mystery what? So it's a lot of just like manually going in and fixing like, okay, Scrappy, do, which just takes so long.
Yeah. Derek and Shannon, how about you guys?
We typically have our episodes about 45 minutes to an hour on average. We've had shorter ones. I think our shortest episode was maybe 35 minutes. Our longest one, we just did our previous season with our guest host. We reviewed the Zombie Island movie, and that one took, I think it was just over 2 hours, and it took me 4 hours to edit it. I think I usually, in my mind, I double however much the duration of the audio is with how much editing is going to go into it. So for me, it's like if it's an hour-long episode, it's going to be about 2 hours with listening to it, whatever editing I choose to do it, because I'm kind of a control freak with that, and that's why I'm the only one that does the editing. Not that I don't trust Shannon to do it, but
he doesn't trust Shannon.
take it done a certain way, and I end up, but probably about.
It's fine by me.
It wasn't for her. So it's probably about, I would say, double the time that it is for the length of the audio.
Yeah. Well, and when we have a third person on,
it's just so much longer.
And we try not to like cut people off, because he and I feed off of each other. We've been doing this for years now, just out of friendship. And so when you have a third person on there, you don't want to like cut them off, and you don't want to end up talking over each other, and it's sometimes harder. So then those episodes tend to be a lot longer. So even if it's like we record for 3 hours and then he's able to cut it down to 2, and it's like, but you still have all that time.
Hence the blooper sodes.
Yes.
Sometimes the bloopers can just be so hilarious. And I try not to put everything in, but sometimes it's hard to pick.
Yeah.
A lot of ours are just random noises that we make while we're
It
recording.
might even just be me burping. Like, oh.
That's funny. JayBee and Millie, what about you guys? Do you try to keep your episodes to a certain length, and about how long does it take you guys to edit them?
I guess
See,
I think are like all over the place, aren't they?
In terms of length, we just set a start time. Like we're gonna get onto the Discord call at this time, and it's just we're gonna see kind of how long it takes. They've ranged from like an hour and a half to about 3.5 hours, I think.
Well, I like to keep it like raw to the most, like, for the most part. The only thing that I really want to edit out is the kind of time between talking. So any time that no one's speaking and there's silence, or like in between sentences when you do that thing where you breathe in and like that type of noise, I'm like, right, I don't want to listen to that. I want to try and get all of that out. But I had like a mini panic attack because we had it from Zombie Island to Cyber Chase, where the episodes were about an hour and a half. And then I was like, kind of like, oh my gosh, I don't know what we're going to speak about for the others. Because of course, like for the earlier ones, we've got my childhood stories, Millie's childhood stories. And then for all of them, you've got Smash's childhood stories. But then in the new ones that he would introduce us to, I was like, okay, we're literally going to start going from hour and a half episodes to like 30, 45 minutes. And I was like, I don't know how I feel about that. I guess it's fine. But then we just go on like the maddest tangents. Like it can vary from anything from like deep conversations. And I'm like, well, the computer physically doesn't have the space. Like we just do everything from a laptop. It physically doesn't have the space to remove a lot of it. So I'm kind of like, oh, I want to keep that forever. Like, can we just have those moments that like just all in that one episode? To the point where I think our longest episode that we've done so far is our most recent one, which is Camp Scare. And that's about 3 hours. And to edit all those little like silencers out and like the breaths out, I think I agree with what Derek's saying. It's literally to have like a ballpark figure. If you've got a 3-hour episode, it's going to take about 6 hours to edit.
And I think like you're saying, one thing for our duration of videos is like, I think because there's also a friendship behind the videos, we were also kind of getting to know each other with our co-host as well. So for the camping one, it was like all our stories about when we'd gone camping when we were young that are kind of in there filling out time. And as well as editing, something that we really struggled with time-wise, it's less of an issue now, but it used to be a really big thing, was when we were uploading, our internet was so slow that we had to set it to upload and allow 24 hours, like where you couldn't touch the laptop, where you just had to make sure it was in a safe space. None of the pets or anything were gonna like walk across it, or like the cats used to like try and run across JayBee's laptop. Like it needs to be in its own space, and that was like a big issue as well for like time wise.
Yeah, so pretty much the episodes are as long as they need to be. Like hopefully we've got to record the Fantasaur next. If like Ashton wants to take us on like a 4 or 5 hour tangent about like teaching us about velociraptors, I'm all for that. That's kind of why I do it. Our funniest things that we've actually got rid of, and it's when we do the microphone test, because I always try and make Ashton laugh. That's like one of my main goals in the start. So when we were going to record the Pirates Ahoy episode and I wanted to make sure the audio was ready, I always like make it a theme to that episode. So I put on a full-on Pirates accent and I'm like, ahoy mateys, you're listening to Smash Our Pass. How are you, Ashton? And I have to get rid of those parts because it's like, it's not a part of the show, but I'm like,
we need to start inserting them at the end.
I know. that would be amazing.
Make some blooper episodes with those in it. Bloopers
I've saved
and funny
one.
moments.
I've only managed to save one, but it's because it was so like inappropriate. I'd managed to catch everyone like off guard with it, and I'm like, I'm never gonna publish this on YouTube, but I want to keep this.
Nice. And Mike, what about you? Do you try to keep your episodes to a certain length, and about how long would it take you to edit?
I've started doing that. I don't really enjoy podcasts that run longer than an hour. So I tried to keep them sort of within 40 minutes to an hour. I've had some episodes that ran like 30 minutes, And I would split the longer ones into 2 episodes, but then as things started getting to be a little bit more of a struggle and episodes were coming out a little more irregularly, it was unfair to the audience to make them wait, many weeks for part 2 of an interview. And I did have a few people comment sort of early on that they would actually like to just have the full interview posted as a single episode. So I started doing that, and then the episodes ended up being more in the hour to hour and a half. But you never know kind of what you're going to get going in. I did an interview recently with somebody who is a cover artist on some Scooby Apocalypse issues, and I was like, 3 covers, we're going to talk for maybe 20 to 40 minutes, and it was a 3-hour conversation. So now it's going to be a process of like going through and editing that down to probably a couple of hours. I may consider splitting that one. I'll only split them now if I'm absolutely confident that I'll be able to release the second episode in a reasonable amount of time, so that people actually get some follow through and get the tail end of the conversation. And as I said previously, for me, it seems to kind of pan out sort of no matter what I do. I've learned a few tricks and some shortcuts and things that have improved the process, but it's still roughly for every 30 minutes of fully produced audio. So you're editing, you're mixing, putting all of your clips and arranging stuff and whatever. It's about 2 hours for every 30 minutes. So if it's an hour episode, it's probably about 4 hours from sitting down to completion. And I started actually trying to, I can't think of the word, basically chop it up into bits where like I'll get home from work and I'll think, I got like 15 or 20 minutes, and I'll just sit down and I'll do a little bit of editing just so that I kind of move it along. And, over the course of a week, you do 15, 20 minutes here or there, and you eventually have yourself a fully edited chunk of audio. And then you just have to, find your audio clips. I do recorded intros and outros, put it all in and mix it together, and then post it, which it brings the time down considerably, which sort of fools my brain into thinking it's not as much work as it actually is, because I'm splitting it up. So staggering, that's the word I was looking for. I stagger the editing for some of my episodes. And sometimes if I'm just, really motivated, I'll just sit down and just crash through a whole thing and get it done and be like, oh, okay, well, it's done. Maybe I'll just do this and do that. And oh, it's up. And now I'll do the social media. And then it's like, put a full episode out.
So when I was editing the Daphne panel, I realized for the first time that my own voice did not like completely annoy me. When I started the podcast, my husband was helping me edit a lot of them web series, because I could not stand the sound of my own voice. And I would sit next to him and tell him what I wanted him to add, while I was sitting there saying, can you listen to this in headphones and just repeat what I say? Like, do I actually have to listen to this? Did any of you find that it was difficult to hear your own voice?
Yeah. It really was. I hated mine. I think Shannon has a really good voice for like radio or podcasting and stuff personally. But I don't like hearing mine. I've never gotten used to it.
I would like hop into a whole different voice, so it's like outside of the mic I talk totally different. So then the second the mic would turn on, I'd be like, hey, how are you today? And I'd be like, who is that? Like, that's not me. So it was just so weird to hear it and be like, was I sitting with you? Like, was that really me?
I think she should go into radio. I think she has a good voice for it, but not me.
Alexa, how about you?
Not as much for the podcast, at least. I kind of went through that with like through school and everything, because we did like crash courses in like radio and TV, and I did an internship at a TV station and everything. So I'm kind of over that now.
Mike, how about you? Did you not like your own voice? Are you used to it now?
I'm used to it now. I mean, I've been doing some form of this for a really long time. Back in the late 90s, I was doing interviews and editing some online magazines. I was a features editor for a website called Silver Bullet Comic Books at the time. And so this was back when streaming video and audio wasn't quite so prevalent and compression wasn't quite so good. So, you know, a half an hour of audio was like 600 megabytes. It was so impractical. So anything that I did was text-based. So it was hours and hours of interviews that were recorded on audio and transcribed. So all of my like weird feelings about my voice were worked out like way back then. But it is interesting to kind of see for other people like what that process is, because we all hear our voices differently in our heads, right? Like what we think our voice sounds like is not what it sounds like to other people. So when we're hearing ourselves recorded, it's coming back to us in a very different way, and it is a process. So
JayBee and Millie, how about you guys?
I think I'm quite lucky because JayBee does do most of the editing, and I used to try and like pick up the extra doing like extra studying and stuff that I could help him out with. So he was kind of the one that had to listen back to it. And I know when we first started the channel, you really didn't like having to hear your voice.
Every time I'd go to edit, it would be like I'd need a bucket next to me in case I wanted to vomit. Like I hated it so much, more than anything in the world. I was like, I don't want to hear this, I don't want to hear it. But say 750 or 800 videos later, I'm more than used to it now. And I don't know, I kind of feel like I got over that so long ago, just because of the amount of time editing with all the different videos. You know, we try and upload quite a lot, and we used to have 5-Star Talk podcasts go out on Sunday, and then obviously Smash or Pass on Saturday. So it was, you know, 12 videos in a week, 2 videos at the weekend. And I think it's just going to go from like insecurity to insecurity. And that's why it's like, I don't know, like I'm so scared to go on this panel because of like the face cam stuff. I think on the whole channel, like I say, we've done about 800 videos, and I think only 2 of them have our faces in, and that's kind of the thing. So probably it'll be a while before I get to watch this panel, but once I get to it, it's going to be the next thing where I'm like, okay, maybe it's not that bad.
Yeah, like you've conquered that fear. What's the next one?
If I can add one thing, it wasn't so much the voice, but finding certain speech patterns and certain words that I or my co-hosts would use and repeat, or even guests. You find that people get into these patterns where they're filling space with lots of like holder words, like, you know, or like, or just doing the or, you know, whatever. And you find them just, it's a cycle, and it keeps going and going and going. And as I'm editing kind of that stuff out of those people's voice or speech patterns or whatever, if they're overly repetitive. And then I get annoyed with my speech patterns, and I've worked so many things out of the way I talk just because I couldn't stand the amount of work it took for me to edit out my own stuff. And it's like, I'm doing it to myself. So the more you do it, you learn the patterns, and you know what's required of the time and the editing and whatever. And that's, yeah, more so than the voice. It's the stuff that's actually said repetitively.
That's a good point. You know, sometimes it's not how you sound or like how you say things, it's what you say. And so often I say the stupidest things, and I'm like, can I edit that out? Like, I think at the start of a Loch Ness Monster podcast, I got the direction of Scotland wrong in relation to where I live in the UK. Like, I was like, oh yeah, that you could just go down to Scotland, and you were like, well, Scotland's up, and I was like, yeah, it is. It is up, you're right. And I'm just like editing back to that, I'm like, I can't believe that I actually passed a law degree.
And I'm like very guilty of the filler words as well. Like is my biggest thing. Everything I say, even before I'm answering a question, I say kind of like, and then answer. I do tend to like try and buy time with fillers so much. So for editing, JayBee, I do apologize.
It's good.
Yeah, with ours, I've noticed that Shannon says, my thing is a lot. Everything is her thing. My thing is such and such. I say, so anyway, I say a lot. That's for me, as you know.
Well, and like I remember when we first started, my biggest thing was like. And he called me up on the phone one day when he was editing, and he was like, if I hear you say the word like again, you're done. I was like, I'm sorry.
Oh my gosh, it's got to the point where like there's been so many spooky moments where I've been editing and having like a conversation with Millie at the same time. And what she said the exact same thing in real life that she said in editing, and I was like, oh my gosh, what the heck just happened? Can we stop that? I need some quiet now. What's going on?
Yeah, for me, it's harder to edit out that kind of stuff. I do try to, but because it's more of a web series, the more I edit, the more it jumps. And there was a point in the beginning where I said I wasn't going to edit anything within the conversation. It was just going to be the beginning and the end. And then some things kind of went awry. and I realized that, okay, I'm going to have to edit some stuff. There are periods where no one is saying anything. In the beginning, I would ask a question and not say, okay, let's start with this person, so I just kind of expected people to just answer. And it's harder because there's usually 5 people and we don't want to be talking over each other. So then no one's answering. So I kind of realized that I would need to do some editing in the middle. So I do try to edit out the silence, anything that I feel isn't necessary to keep in, but I do try to edit a little bit less because I don't want it to be really jumpy in the video itself.
It surprised me that when you started up this project, because I remember we were talking about it either on Twitter or somewhere, and I was like, oh, so maybe like a podcast or whatever, and you're like, oh, I'm thinking like a video series, and I was like, okay, so you're jumping into the deep end.
And what's funny is that I've had this idea for years and I didn't do it because I don't like being on video. I don't like being the center of attention. I don't like people looking at me. And yet, yeah, instead of doing a podcast where you would just hear my voice and not see me, I decided to do a web series, which is so odd. But I think I'm slowly getting used to it. I mean, I still get super nervous before every recording. And, my husband's like, it's okay. Like, you've talked to these people before and you're going to be okay. But yeah. Let's talk about what sets your podcast apart from everybody else's podcasts. So Alexa, let's start with you.
Oh no. I don't know. I don't know how to word this without it sounding like, oh well, mine is so much better than everyone else's. I don't know. I'd like to think that my interview style is unique to me, and that I'm quite proud of that. So I'm gonna go with that.
Mike, how about you? What do you feel sets your podcast apart?
Well, I suppose with Billy and Amelia shuttering their podcast, I'm pretty much the last of the OG Scooby podcasts sort of still live. Previously, it was What's With You, Scooby-Doo, Scooby-Doo Truth Project, Scooby-Doos and Scooby-Don'ts, and myself. I go for a very kind of deep dive. A lot of times, I think the last interview I posted, I mean, we barely kind of talked about Scooby in a very specific sense. We talked very much about, this was an interview with Thomas Cook and his working at the studio and being there in like the late 70s and 80s, early 80s, and just what it was like to be at Hanna-Barbera. And I'm really interested in sort of the oral history aspect of it. Early on, I incorporated a little more of a holistic, like Hanna-Barbera kind of mandate. It wasn't just about the Scooby-Doo. I think they're related. So a lot of times what's going on in the studio informs sort of what's going on with the shows. And I also do, I hate the word added value content, but one of the things that I've always kind of had a beef with is you have a 50-year-old or 51-year-old franchise now. I mean, this is animation history, and most of the releases that we get, like even the really deluxe stuff, like the recent Blu-ray releases of the new Scooby-Doo movies and Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? Like the features are incredibly minimal or non-existent, or they're just recycling stuff that's already sort of been in circulation for a really long time. And there's so many talented people who have worked on this franchise over the course of many, many years. And you know, I can't tell you how many times I've talked to somebody who, after, when I first approached them, they're kind of like, I don't know what I have to say about Scooby-Doo. Like that was a few years in the studio. It was like, I was under contract. That's just, they give you the show to work on, you know, whatever. But then reliving that and having those conversations, they're just really happy. And you know, bringing some of that to things like audio commentaries for episodes that they've worked on. It also gives a little bit of extra background that maybe doesn't get covered in the interviews proper, because it's kind of like a scene-specific commentary where they can talk about an episode more specifically. So that's kind of what's probably most unique about my show.
Derek and Shannon, what about you guys? What sets you guys apart from the other podcasts?
I would say that when we were first conceiving it and we were talking about what already existed in the Scooby-Doo podcast realm of the internet and what we wanted to do that was actually just not doing the exact same thing. So we wanted to do the reviews. We knew we wanted to do that. But in order to add on to that, we started doing like our mystery machine match, which is when we like do our trivia at the beginning of the episode. So Shannon and I take turns asking questions, and it's kind of educational even for Scooby-Doo fans or non-fans, because it can be really specific stuff like or really generic stuff like what color pants does Fred wear? Or it'll ask you like who voiced Shaggy in this movie, and like it's fun learning the trivia. We try to do the fun facts at the end of the episode too. So again, added educational value for Scooby-Doo. We try to do the news when we're really current and not on a hiatus, because then we don't want to be releasing news that is old news. Like that's just not anything that's valuable to anybody. And I don't know, do you have anything to add?
We do my biggest thing, because I wasn't like a huge Scooby-Doo person, so it was kind of, I think something a little different was that like he knew almost everything and I knew nearly nothing. And so doing the mystery machine match, it was like people could come back to Scooby-Doo kind of with me. And then so that I didn't get burned out, we kind of randomize everything. So we don't have a say in what we watch. We completely randomize it. And we hop from series to series. So in our season, we watch one episode of every series. And so that way it's kind of, you're not getting burnt out on one series in a whole season. And then, you know, again, like it's all randomized. So there's not really a choice. So sometimes we love it and sometimes we hate it.
I would hate to do like what Scooby-Doo's or Scooby-Don'ts was with their chronological podcast. Like if we had to sit down and watch all 24 episodes of the new Scooby-Doo movies, I think we would just quit.
Yeah, we would have.
I would not want to do that. And I think even on top of like what our podcast does for itself with audio, because I'm a graphic designer, I'm also just really, really picky about like visual presentation too. So I spend a lot of time, honestly, like coming up with ideas for visuals for like our Instagram or the logo and everything like that. And I don't know, I just get really picky about that. I'm always texting Jen like, does this look okay? Does this look okay? I did that to her today actually, because we did our we're gonna do our contest for the season for our giveaway, and I made the graphic, and I always just send it over to Shannon like, does this look okay? Like I just like to have that stamp of approval, because I just always like us to look our best as well.
JayBee and Millie, how about you guys? What sets your podcast apart from the others?
I think it's just the amount of perspective. So I think we're quite lucky to have Smash as on the show all the time, because we class them as our Scooby expert. They know the history of the movie. They know what was happening with Hanna-Barbera at the time. They know what was happening with the voice cast at the time. They can tell you why all the changes were made that were made from movie to movie. So it's good to have their kind of knowledge there. At the same time, I'm the other end of the spectrum that, like I said, my parents just weren't there with animated TV at all. So there was a lot of gaps in my Scooby knowledge of movies that I just didn't see, that were turned off partway through. So I really needed to kind of revisit and go back through things that I maybe hadn't even fully seen before. So like I'm at the other end of the spectrum, and then JayBee again you're kind of like the middle ground, aren't you?
Yeah, try and do as much research as I can surrounding a movie, like release day, voice cast, and everything like that. And so it is literally like, I don't want to say it's like from expert level to more like novice level, because like obviously that's not really true. But I think like the amount of questions, I guess if you can put it in like a kind of a simplistic way as possible, we have our Scooby expert on hand, and we're probably firing any questions that we can possibly at them. And even behind the scenes, I think maybe like Smash has been tempted to block me at some point, because I just scroll through eBay and I can like take 5 screenshots and like send them like, can you tell me like the Pogo Scooby, like this looks amazing, can you tell me about it? And then he gets back to me within seconds like, oh, so that was released as a promotional material for the Alien Invaders movie, this is the trailer and this is the details around it. And I'm like, okay, I like that. So I guess it's just us kind of squeeze as much information from the Scooby expert as possible.
It's kind of fun though, like with you guys maybe not having as much knowledge, because you bring something new to it. Whereas Ashton is looking at it, he's seen a lot of the episodes before, he knows a lot about it. And so he has that perspective, like you said, of being the Scooby expert. But you guys are coming in kind of with fresh eyes, and maybe some of them you were watching for the first time. So it's a totally different perspective than somebody that's seen it over and over again. So it's kind of cool.
And that's where a lot of it stems from as well. If it is something that we've seen for the first time, like Ashton will like say, I'm really looking forward to hearing your perspective on this. And so I think a lot of it is that for some that we haven't seen before, he almost acts as a guide for everything there. So he's like hoping that we're going to ask certain types of questions, and then he's like filling us in on details that he wanted to tell us. So it is very much, and I think I kind of agree with that perspective. Like we've kind of got someone that people that are just hopping in for the first time that want to get back into Scooby, we've got that perspective. But I think as well there's also just like a knowledge dump as well onto that, because I think Ashton gets very excited about telling us stuff, and of course then how we would respond to that, which is either a very sensible response or it's just me being a bit of an idiot.
And I think because he's been part of the Scooby community a lot longer than we have, if we've just like seen a movie for the first time and we've given our opinion on it, he's then like, okay, well, this is how it was received by everyone else. Like, this is kind of what the general perception was in the community at the time when this was released, or this is why people were taken by surprise. For like the Goblin King, just like, you know, this was completely different for anything at the time. This is how people kind of received that movie and that kind of thing. So then they add more context to our opinions as well. So
with that, let's talk about feedback that you guys all get for your podcasts. I know I've been focusing a lot on negative feedback lately with a couple of my videos. It's more just because I think it's ridiculous that people that hate something still want to comment on it and just trash it. And to me, if you don't like something, just don't watch it. So what kind of feedback do you guys get for your podcasts? Mike, let's start with you.
I don't really get much. That's actually one of the least fun things about doing the show. If I didn't enjoy doing the interviews and stuff, I probably would have quit by now, just because it does kind of feel like operating in a vacuum. I've heard a few things from a few people. I get the odd message kind of here and there. from weird places. Somebody who works for Cirque du Soleil messaged me one day to tell me that they listened to the podcast, and I'm kind of like, okay, thanks for the thumbs up. But yeah, like the most negative thing I've ever heard was just, hey, don't put intros and outros on your commentaries, or don't split your episodes, which I kind of consider constructive criticism. And probably 99% of what I do hear, if I hear anything, is just positive.
Alexa, how about you? What kind of feedback do you get?
So far, it's all been really great. I love hearing from people that are like, oh yeah, like I listened to like 3 of your episodes in one day. I always love feedback like that. But I also just really value a lot of the like industry feedback that I've gotten from people that I've interviewed that's like, oh, like I listened to your past episodes and they're actually really good, which is always somewhat interesting, but it's all been really good.
Derek and Shannon, how about you guys?
I think we, for the most part, get positive feedback. I think really the only negative comments we ever get is just when people are upset that we're on a break. That's really kind of it. I did make the mistake once or twice where like a fan has a question and then I answered like probably like on my personal Facebook, and then they start messaging me all the time on my personal Facebook, and it's like, oh no, why did I do that? And I actually I actually have had to mute people as a result of that. It sucks, but I don't really think anything negative. When it comes to positive feedback, I think the funny thing that I hear from people who aren't Scooby-Doo fans, who are really just kind of listening because they want to hear Shannon and I, is like I'm enjoying this a lot more than I thought I would. And I like to describe our podcast as like the Scooby-Doo podcast, where if you haven't seen it, you don't have to see it. Like we're probably going to talk through what we're watching and you're going to be in on the joke with us. So I think for the most part, we get positive feedback, and I'm thankful for that.
It's funny too, because a lot of our friends listen to it, and it's not like we were like, hey, listen to our podcast, we just put out a new episode. Like we would just kind of say it in passing, like, oh yeah, we started this podcast, and they'd be like, oh my gosh, what is it? And then all of a sudden, like, they're huge fans and they'll be like, are you guys gonna put a new one out? Like, or like we'll put it out and they'll listen to it right away and like message us about it. Or
they want to be on the podcast. Yeah. They'll be like, hey, can you put us on the list of people that we could? Yeah, we'll put you on the list. You'll be on it at some point.
It was just funny because it's not something that I expected going into like a Scooby-Doo podcast, but it's just something that like everyone loves. And like Derek said, like it's not something that, you know, if you haven't watched that specific episode, you don't really have to, because we kind of make fun of it enough that you know what's going on.
Yeah.
JayBee and Millie, how about you guys? What kind of feedback do you get?
We actually get, I guess, surprisingly intellectual feedback. So I'm thinking back to our Where's My Mummy episode, and I think we go on a tangent about that, about how, you know, Velma probably shouldn't have done what she was doing. She should have like filled in the rest of the gang on her plan. And we got like a massive, like, I want to say it was maybe 200 word like comment saying, okay, well, maybe this is why she did this, and that's why she couldn't tell people. And also she wasn't technically endangering the gang because the 2 mummies like went back to possibly save Shaggy and Scooby. And then in our Monster of Mexico episode, we were a bit confused about why pyramids. I think it was that episode anyway, unless I'm mistaken. But there was one episode about pyramids that it wasn't necessarily set in Egypt. So we were a bit confused. And then they were like, oh, well, actually, in like from this time period, the Aztecs, you know, made pyramids. So I was like, okay, I like that. The only bit of negativity we've got is I don't think we've got one comment on the Cyber Days episode just saying so not cool. And I was like, okay.
I think not necessarily feedback, but I think the only negativity for you is literally just like your brother bullies you for doing a Scooby-Doo podcast. That's the closest thing you get, I think, to like negative feedback, and he obviously doesn't bully me for it because I'm not
like you can just take the Scooby-Doo teddy upstairs and like he's like, hey, and I'm like, oh gosh. But no, all of it's been pretty much good feedback, especially in like surrounding things around it. Like we debuted our new intro, which was with Gray Griffin, Gray Delisle. We premiered that at the start of our Camp Scare episode. and then I like clipped it and made it into like an original clip by itself. And like the comments on that, it was literally, and I get weird. It was at like a really bad time, and I was just like I was like tearing up, like, oh my gosh, this is so good.
Yeah,
because
and we got separate messages as well.
Beyond
so the feedback
that,
is good.
Yeah, and not only to that, but we've also like had comments like behind the scenes on just the artwork that we use. We always try and commission original art pieces from an artist that we've been working with for about a year now. So just like all the feedback on that and how like we've drawn up the concepts and how talented they are is just amazing.
It's interesting that I have a lot of engagement on social media with the community. There's lots of back and forth. People comment on things I post. I comment on things other people's posts, but like probably 1 in 50 messages are commenting on an actual episode that I've produced, which never made any sense to me, but
I feel like people think that the things that we do, they just kind of, we record them perfectly, we just upload it, and it's there for them to listen to. You know, they don't realize the amount of time it really takes to do one episode, the amount of money that we put into it. I mean, it's not free to host a podcast. You know, I have websites. It's not free to host websites. The domain names cost money. You know, there's costs that go into it that we're putting into it, and we're not making money. I enjoy it. I like doing it. As long as I can do it and I don't get burnt out, I'll continue to do episodes. And as long as people actually want to be on the panels, because obviously I can't do this myself. You know, Scooby Panel is nothing with just one person. So as long as I can keep it going, keep getting guests, then it will work. Does anybody have anything else that they want to say? Anything that they want to discuss?
I'd be curious to know what software people are using to do their recording and editing. What's the gear? Let's talk gear.
JayBee and Millie, we'll start with you guys.
Very, very rudimentary setup, I guess. What I should have mentioned in terms of like some of the difficulties is the fact that in terms of technology, I may as well have been born in the late 20s. I have no idea how to use that. And it's another thing because I always pride myself on like the fact that I love listening to podcasts to fall asleep to like wash up the dishes to, or just to mess around and like have them just like listening to them. And yet like I haven't figured out how to put it on iTunes yet. So in terms of just gear alone, we record, because we started off as, you know, gamers on YouTube. We record all of our podcasts on Discord and just have OBS set up. We've like figured out about 6 months ago how to record using how to record Discord calls using OBS. But prior to that, it was literally just, we had a microphone set up and a phone on a tripod, and the Discord call would be recorded. Like it would be literally like the tripod would be next to the microphone while the Discord call was on. So for us, it's literally just Discord and OBS.
Yeah, technology has certainly been a big advancement for us. Like JayBee said, our YouTube channel kind of started off as gameplay and things as well. And then we didn't have a capture card. So again, it was just like a phone on the tripod.
Yeah, just pointed to a TV.
Pointed at the screen, yeah. It did start off very, very minimal with technology, and we've definitely not progressed too far.
An editing software, I don't know what it's called, but we've got it's like a HP Windows laptop. And all I do is I go into the tab and type in video editor and it just pops up. I don't think it's got a name. I just think it's just Windows video editor. And that's it. Unless I'm on my phone, then it'd be iMovie, but that's just for like clips.
Shannon and Derek, how about you guys?
When we first did Crystal Cove Radio, we were renting a mic from the Oakland University Tech Lab. I don't remember what kind of mic it was, but it's not the same as what we use now. We have a Yeti Blue mic for recording, both of us do, because then when the pandemic started, we had to start doing it at home. And then at one point, actually, Shannon had COVID. So we really had no choice but to
be
do
separate.
it. Yeah. I use Adobe Audition for the audio editing. Did you use what, Audacity, or what were you using when you were recording? Do you remember?
It might have been Audacity.
I think I probably recommended that to you. But I use Adobe Audition because I already have it with my Adobe subscription, because I use Photoshop and Illustrator for my work in general, and that's what I also use for all the visuals on the podcast. But it's primarily Audition with our Yeti Blue mic.
Alexa, how about you?
I work in the Adobe suite too, and I have been doing a bit of video work in DaVinci Resolve, which has been working pretty well too.
Nice. And Mike?
I use Audacity for the recording and the editing. I'm thinking about changing that up just because I'm starting to get a little bit more into the audio and wanting to do maybe a little bit more robust things with it. So don't know if that's going to happen soon, but I might be upgrading at some point. And I was using a Snowball for recording for the first like 3 or 4 years, and just recently bought this Rode mic here, which has been pretty decent. And yeah, I mean, still keeping it pretty basic. Podcasting is a pretty democratic thing. You don't really need a lot of technology to do it. It just depends on sort of what you want to do and how far you can push the technology you're using. So it's just always, right now I'm actually not using like anything that I normally use, because normally I'm hooked up to my computer, but I've got this headset now because I'm using my work laptop because the camera crapped out. So I don't know if this is actually better quality than what I'm normally doing, but I guess I'll find out when I watch this panel back.
I was just going to ask where everybody's podcasts are like hosted. Like, do you use like SoundCloud, Buzzsprout? Like, where do you host your podcast before you send out the RSS feed?
Alexa?
I'm on Podbean, which I like a lot, actually.
Mike?
Libsyn.
JayBee and Millie?
So it's just posted onto YouTube for the moment, but I want to try and get it onto SoundCloud and iTunes when I can figure out how to do that.
And Derek and Shannon?
We started out on SoundCloud, and then our friend Lexi has a podcast, and they recommended Buzzsprout, and that's what we switched over to about a year.
And we love it.
We love Buzzsprout.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's what we use.
You can do fun little like clips, so you can post those. Yeah, you can do like visual sound bites, and you can post those on. We post them on Instagram, but you can kind of post them anywhere, and it's just like really fun.
I do use Buzzsprout, but I have no idea how to use it. Like, I just started making everything into a podcast in July. So I know how to upload episodes, but that's about it. I haven't really played with any of the other options on there. And then for editing, well, obviously recording, I use Zoom, which probably isn't the best thing to use, but it works. It's been working. So I figured I would just stick with it for now. And then for editing, I use Movavi, and I can do a lot in there. It was a big learning curve for me because I really had no idea how to use it when I started all of this. And I feel like I sort of know how to use it for the most part now. So
I guess I've been using Zoom as well for the Scooby podcast for the last little while.
So do you record your episodes when, like, on video when you do them?
I do, yeah. There was at one point I was considering incorporating video, because all of my podcasts get uploaded to YouTube, but they're just like a static tile of the podcast logo. And weirdly, even though it's not designed for YouTube, my other podcast, For Your Consideration, most of our traffic kind of comes from YouTube. And it's an audio only video, so I don't know what people find enjoyable about it, but I started incorporating the Zoom because of the somebody I was interviewing didn't want to just do audio; they wanted to see the person they were talking to. So we went with Zoom because they didn't have Skype, and then Zoom has the record feature, and Skype had to have a third-party recording application. So I kind of figured Zoom sort of does it all in one. So I just subscribed to Zoom, and I've been using Zoom for the Scooby podcast kind of ever since. And I have the video if I need the video in the future. I can take screenshots if I want to promote on social media or anything. And the audio seems to be decent quality. So, yeah.
Derek and Shannon, do you guys video record your podcasts?
We don't. We did have to do the camera when we were separated, when we were recording it for both of our houses, and we were actually using Facebook Messenger's video feature for that. We haven't really ever done it otherwise. It's actually funny that, Mike, that you said that about like people you interview like wanting to see you, because there was one time we guest hosted on Scott Niswander. He is from NerdSync. He did the Month of Monsters podcast where he was watching Scooby-Doo 2 Monsters Unleashed every day for the month of October. I think it was in like 2018.
That was a fun podcast.
It was so funny.
So fun.
And it was kind of weird now that I'm thinking back on it, because we didn't do video.
No.
We had never really met Scott before. We don't know him, and we're literally just kind of like on a phone call basically. And now I'm thinking about it, that's just so weird to think that we did that because we could not see him while we're talking.
And it's really funny too, because like everyone reaches out to Derek because he's the person that does most of the work on the podcast. And so then like when it comes to like me getting on stuff, I'm just like, hey, I'm here. Like, I don't know what anybody looks like, but I'm here.
Alexa, do you video record your podcast?
I have been lately. I use Zencaster. So originally they didn't have a video platform and it was just audio, but they released video capability back in February, I think. So I've started using that and it's been awesome. I love it. It records separate tracks, which is my absolute favorite thing.
Zoom is supposed to record separate tracks, but it doesn't work. So
you don't get a separate video and audio?
Well, I get the video and audio separate, but they're supposed to record separate, like you would be on a separate track, JayBee and Millie separate. But when I tried it, it didn't record everybody's stuff. So there would be points where somebody was talking, but their separate track was not recording their audio. So because my dog used to howl in all of my panels, and other people have their dogs barking, I wanted to be able to take that out. If I wasn't talking, I could take him howling out. But because it won't record the separate tracks for the whole panel, I can't do that. So now I just add a picture of them at the end and their howl or their bark. It's just easier to do it that way.
You know, it's funny that you said that about like separate tracks, because when we started doing ours separately, there was a couple episodes when I was editing where we were mid conversation in the review and then suddenly we're just talking over each other like constant, like it got mixed up in there, and we discovered that like one of our computers was like going to sleep during the recording, so it wouldn't catch any of that audio.
I think it was my computer at one point, because I would just have my mouse and I would just have to sit like this while talking to Derek, and then I'd catch myself like really into the conversation. I'd stop and I'd be like, no, okay, hold on.
And I'd be like, Shannon, you have to change your settings so we can not lose so much conversation, because then I would be texting her late at night while I'm editing. I'm just like, Shannon, I am missing so much content and it's making this editing process like double the work. I was so upset.
I think the technology issues that we've had can probably be one of the hardest parts of doing this. With the Daphne panel, like I said, the first 40 minutes of it was completely unusable. We had to redo the whole intro because there were two people that were having issues with their video and audio. Finally, after like 45 minutes, we were able to start completely from the beginning. And yeah.
It's harder to do when you're interviewing somebody and you're not sure sort of what their technological level is and you don't feel comfortable. They're already giving your time, so you don't feel comfortable asking them to, launch their own audio application and like record their own audio so that you can have a nice clean track. But a lot of podcasters, when they're doing shows with other podcasters, they will ask you hey, can you record on your end and then send me the file? And then you've got isolated audio tracks of everybody's spoken voice. And it does make things like so much easier, and it's so much more flexible. And the audio sounds so much more better because when you're getting it like straight off of their mic rather than whatever you're receiving because of your, you know, bandwidth or whatever issues you might be having with internet speeds and stuff on your end. So I've started doing that when like dealing with other podcasters, but I still don't feel comfortable phoning somebody up and being like, you want to record your side?
Right.
A little plug for Zencastr here is that it's all web-based. So you just have someone click a link to join in. It records on their end, uploads to the program so that they don't have to do anything. And then you just download it from the program and you can save it automatically to Dropbox or Google Drive. I love it.
Nice.
And they're all isolated?
Yeah.
Cool.
Mm-hmm. Isolates audio and video too, so you can have your MP4 and your audio.
And do you get any kind of like $20 or something if somebody joins up from you?
No, I just use the free version.
Oh, okay. JayBee and Millie, do you guys video record your podcast?
No, we're actually saying that this would be quite strange if Smash was here, because we've recorded like 15 episodes with him and never done like a video call once. So this would be the first one. So it's just like, oh my god.
It would have been the first time that we were like interacting face to face. Although at one point though, of course, the dream is to like find somewhere to build like a studio, almost like recreate the visual we use in real life and have like cameras catching different angles. But if that were to ever happen, it's at least 25 years away. But no, we don't tend to do that.
All podcasts will be holograms by then.
Oh,
everything will be
beamed into your mind.
Things will be very different in 25 years, that's for sure. Anybody have anything else that they want to talk about? Any more questions?
I have another question.
Okay.
Something that I noticed with myself, and from what I'm kind of hearing from everybody here on the panel, and from what I know of other Scooby podcasters, most of us seem to have kind of just started out and figured everything out kind of as we've gone along. And I'm curious, I will reach out now to people I know who have some experience with audio stuff if I have a question and I can't figure it out. Has anybody here on the panel ever reached out to any other Scooby podcasters or any other podcasters that they may know for advice on what they're doing? Or did we all stubbornly just be like, no, I'm going to figure this out myself?
I know for me, I haven't. And it's more of I'm afraid to ask somebody because I don't know how they're going to take it. You know, I don't want anybody to feel like I'm trying to take away from them or, you know, be better than them. And, you know, for me to ask advice, I feel like somebody might think that I'm trying to get their secrets and you know, it's weird. That's just me. Alexa, how about you?
No, not necessarily to any Scooby podcast, at least. One of my best friends is like the tech guy. So I asked him a couple of I think Photoshop questions when I was trying to get some stuff going there. But otherwise, yeah, no, I was just like, nope, I'm doing this myself. I'm figuring it out.
JayBee and Millie?
In terms of starting the Scooby-Doo podcast, logistically everything was sorted because we had a podcast running alongside that at the time called 5 Star Talk, and I suppose there we'd have to give a lot of credit to you know, YouTuber, I guess, Nintendo Guru, who unfortunately passed away a bit ago, but they were the one that like gave us so much advice on that episode in terms of audio, work ethic, and just how to go about things. And from there, we kind of just did things going forward. Like even when Ashton has been on a bit of a hiatus recently, we've kind of learned to like always have like a placeholder episode there. And then we use that, say, when Ashton couldn't record 2 weeks ago, one thing I was very unhappy with was how the audio quality was on our Zombie Island episode. So I was like, okay, if nothing else, I'm going to make the best version of the Zombie Island episode and then add it into that collection. So I'd say that was then the definitive way to listen to that. But in terms of reaching out, I guess we were very lucky that we already knew Ashton from the community. And so it was like, look, how do you think is the best way to go about things? And just like the order on how do you want to talk about everything. And from there, things were quite easy.
We also had another YouTube friend who, when they found out we'd started to use OBS, did like a 2-hour call with JayBee, going through every setting that they used. For example, like it gets rid of dog barks and all that kind of thing. It manages to differentiate between your voice and background noise. And so they spent a good 2 hours with you saying that, which was great.
And we literally did this thing where like I couldn't believe it, but I got up like dog noise sound effects on YouTube, and I was just having a normal conversation with Millie, and we were playing these dog noises in the background. And when we re-listened to it and they weren't there, I was like, oh my gosh, this is gonna change everything.
Derek and Shannon, how about you guys? Did you reach out to anybody?
For advice, I know that at one point when Billy and Amelia would do like they would like do like a spooktacular episode, like every 100 episodes they did, and they would like invite people to ask questions. I had asked a question about like probably just advice to give to someone who wanted to start a Scooby-Doo podcast. And I think I was really delighted about that because I actually missed the deadline of when they wanted their questions by. And Billy still answered the question like in the following episode that wasn't the spectacular. So I was like, oh my gosh, he's still answering my question. That was really cool. I know I had actually reached out probably a long time ago, probably like to Mike actually, because I wanted to at one point even hop on to talk with you about something Scooby-Doo related. But in terms of actual advice, I think I just asked that from Billy and Amelia. And for all like the technical stuff, I mostly try and just Google it and figure it out on my own. I think I just kind of, we pride ourselves on just being able to do our own thing and kind of like self-taught all the editing and all that. So in terms of actually like producing the podcast, I think we've kind of, for the most part, done it on our own.
Well, and him being a graphic designer, and then I'm a photographer, so computer-wise, we're kind of a little more tech savvy. So with stuff like that, we're kind of able to pick it up a little bit faster. So we can watch that video and then go, okay, I know how to do that now.
Yeah.
So.
And Mike, did you reach out to anybody?
No, not in the beginning. There's points, I don't know, it was last year or the year before, where I run into a couple of audio issues that I couldn't solve on my own, and I reached out to Nick because I know Nick, the host of What's With You Scooby-Doo. I know that he's really into audio and music, and he kind of knows his decibels and his levels and whatever filters. So I was just like, hey, how can I, clean this up or make it a little bit more palatable, a little more sort of up to my standard. Sometimes you just have audio and you have no control over how it sounds, and you just sort of have to suck it up and either release it or not release it. So I think we managed to clean it up a little bit, but yeah, basically it was the same sort of thing for me. It was just stubborn and self-taught stuff. Although there was like an epiphany moment I had last year listening to a podcast about podcasts where I was introduced to the truncate feature in Audacity, which blew my mind. So I don't really think that was reaching out necessarily, but as it was a podcast designed to give you tips on podcasting, I think it's in kind of a little gray area.
I don't think looking stuff up is necessarily the same. I mean, I've looked up so many things to try to figure out how to do something, and because it's hard when you're first learning the editing software. It's hard to really figure out everything, and I have so many different ideas that trying to actually make them happen sometimes is hard because I don't know the first thing about video editing. So the first time that when my husband made the little mouse run across the screen with the box of Scooby snacks, I was just like, that is amazing. That's like the best edit in any of the videos I've ever done.
I've kind of grown out of that, I think, because I've got a third podcast that it's kind of in development right now. And I've been reaching out to other people that I know quite a bit just to, I want to launch it at a certain level rather than sort of be learning along the way. So I don't have anywhere near as much pride or stubbornness with this one, with the new one than I had with my previous ones.
Yeah, I mean, Shannon's also talked about doing her own podcast on other topics and stuff, and she's asked me for like advice on what to use for editing and all, but like, yeah, it's mostly just been looking it up all on her own.
Out of curiosity, what was like the moment for everyone where you were like, yeah, I'm gonna make a Scooby-Doo podcast?
For me, that moment was years ago. I just didn't have the confidence to do it. And then the only reason I started this was because Comic Kate asked me to do something with him live on Instagram. And I said yes. And then after I said yes, I was like, why did I say yes? I have not even shown my face on any of my posts. Like, I don't want anyone to see me. So why did I say yes? And then I kept saying, I'm just going to tell him I can't do it. But then I was like, no, I committed. That'd be rude. So I did it. And then my husband said, well, now everyone knows who you are. So now you just need to make your ideas happen. So I said, all right, fine. We'll see how it goes. I'll do the panel. If I can get people, then I'll start it. And yeah.
This is a little off topic, but Nikki, you mentioned the whole thing about people seeing your face. And I remember when I came into the community, everyone on the websites, on the boards, on Twitter, like everybody was going by aliases. It felt very much like being in late 90s IRC channels.
Yeah.
And everybody had avatars. Nobody was actually broadcasting their actual names or faces. And I remember somebody early on with my social media was kind of like, they were kind of weirded out that I was just posting pictures of me with stuff and my name was out there and whatever. And I'm like, yeah, that's branding, you know, like if I'm doing this podcast and you get to know me and it's all about like me and my show and I've got this other show and maybe you'll go to the other show. And there was just this weird disconnect, I guess, or cognitive dissonance or something. But that seems to have gone away quite a bit. And I'm not sure what the catalyst for that was, but I don't know if you could speak on that.
It kind of started with like when I did the live thing with Kate, then Daphne too started doing live stuff, and then other people started doing live stuff. And I think it just took that one thing to happen for people to realize, oh, we can actually go live. You know, it's okay if people know what we look like. Let's just do what we want to do. And it just kind of went from there. So now I think people are less afraid to let everybody know who they are. Mike, since you were talking, why don't you let us know that moment that you knew that you wanted to do the podcast?
It's pretty much exactly as I described it when I was talking about why I made the podcast. It was literally going online and finding almost no information on how Zombie Island got made and what Warner Brothers' intentions were and how much oversight the production had, and just nothing. So I was like, okay, I didn't want to do a Scooby podcast, but I guess I'm doing a Scooby-Doo podcast now because I cannot not have these questions answered. And that was it.
Alexa, how about you?
For me, I think it was in the fall of 2019. I was working as a video editor and just realized that, you know what, I love doing this for work, but I'd love to work on projects that I actually want to work on. And then it didn't really get started until COVID really hit, and I was like, oh, I have a lot of extra time. So yeah, it really just started with like, well, I have the skills, might as well put it towards something that I enjoy doing.
JayBee and Millie?
Legit, the moment that we kind of decided was the moment that I thought that I was clever enough to come up with the idea. because it was just like, you know, obviously there's like other kind of you know, connectives and representations for the phrase smash or pass, but obviously the whole, I guess I can call it like the family friendly premise of it is deciding if you want to go for something or if you don't want to go for something. And so I was kind of like, well, I've seen a lot of reviews, and I think one of my favorites, I forget the name, but it's a movie podcast, and there's 3 or 4 hosts on that, and at the end of the episode they decide if they recommend it or not recommend it. And so the whole thing was, okay, if we can get Ashton involved there now in a Smash on the Internet, let's just go through all the Scooby-Doo movies and end our show with a smash or pass. In hindsight, I don't know, maybe if I could travel back in time and rebrand and maybe make it a different name, I perhaps would. But I think if I wasn't like so proud of the name that I'd come up with, I wouldn't have like pushed to reach out to Ashton or like ask Millie like, okay, so you know, Smash comments on our videos and we speak to him occasionally. Can I reach out to him with this idea?
Yeah, it was very much your kind of concept, and you did very well. Like, I'm very happy that you thought of it.
But that was it, like a whole series just because I thought I was clever that I came up with a name. And that's it.
And Derek and Shannon, what about you guys?
Kind of like what I said earlier, like I had just been doing the Do Central blog for a couple of years at that point, and I loved it. And just because Shannon and I had known each other for such a long time, and the things that we say about other shows that we watch, like we're currently rewatching this one show on Netflix, The 4400, and we are just constantly making fun of this show. And I'm just like, you know, I listen to Scooby-Doo podcasts. There's some really funny, you know, commentary that I hear about it. I think that we could do something really funny out of it as well. And I also really like it because when we started doing it, we ended up spending more time together too. And now a lot of our inside jokes with each other is probably Scoobcast related. Are like, it's really bad when like we're in a group of friends and stuff, and like her and I are just make a joke related to the podcast, and like for friends who don't listen to it, they're like, I don't get it, and then we have to kind of explain it if we even bother. But I think like the moment that really kind of struck with me of like really wanting to do it was just getting tired of the blog, wanting to do something different but still Scooby-Doo related, because that's just something I've always been wanting to be related to in that. So yeah.
I'm willing to try just about anything once. And so when Derek came to me with the idea, I was like, okay. And we recorded the very first episode of Crystal Cove Radio.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I don't know. And then like the second we hit, you know, start, and I like turned on. And then when we ended it, I was like, yeah, we could do that. Like that's fine.
And I was just gonna say, I really understand what you mean there with the like pressing start on recordings. Like I used to be such a shy person, it was unbelievable. But like, and JayBee had done YouTube before, and so he was kind of more familiar with stuff. But there is kind of like, I kind of try and use that too, that when you hit record, it's kind of like a different mindset. You're almost entering into a different world. You can be a different person, and it's like that kind of helped me with like a big confidence thing, just knowing that like the second you press record, it's a different, I don't know how to explain it, but I completely understand what you're saying.
Yeah, a bit like playing a character.
Yeah,
a more confident character sometimes.
Yeah, because to add on to that, like I won't go in like specific jokes on this, but there are some jokes that like Shannon makes on the podcast where I'm like, that's just not,
I would never say it in real life.
This is the kind of sense of humor that goes into our podcast. And then like it is, even sometimes makes me hesitant to even like share it, like even on my website and stuff. But like I still do, because I do put a lot of work into it. But there's just some things that either of us say where it's just like we're just very different people here. And it kind of goes to what you guys were talking about earlier, Mike and Nikki, about like presenting yourselves more, like, you know, face, name, and all that, because from the start we've always been really open with that, like of who we are, and at the same time it's also kind of not, because we're just not the same person on the mic as opposed to in real life. And
it almost didn't feel real. Like we would say like Shannon Downey, Derek Queen, we would kind of like plug our, you know, Instagrams or Twitters. And then it was like, I remember the first time we were out camping and Derek was like, let's take a picture for the website. And I was like, my face is going to be out there. And I was like, I post my face on my own Instagram all the time, but like this one's going to be on the, like, this is flat out there for the world. And it was like, I go back to that picture and I'm like, we've posted so much more now. And I'm like, wow, I was so scared for that.
And she even just made a comment today that we need to update that because I was a lot skinnier back then.
What's funny is most people thought I was a guy forever. And if you read a lot of my comments, they're like, man, did you see, or bro, did you see that? Or, and it's like, they had no idea that I was even a girl until I started doing videos and the live stuff.
Because your handle was just ScoobyAddicts.
Right.
Right. I was like, how did somebody mistake Nikki for a dude? And then like, oh, wait. Right.
When I was a kid, I would just go on your website, Nikki. I, for some reason, thought you were a guy too. But I also think part of the problem is like, I think Scooby-Doo, maybe not as much nowadays, but like when I was a kid, I feel like it was marketed to boys for some reason more. So I just kind of always had like this weird mindset that it was for boys and not for girls. And so yeah, I kind of assumed that honestly when I was a kid.
So what you're saying there, it's weird. When you go to like toy stores and things, any Scooby related thing is separated to like the boys section. It's near the cars and all that kind of thing. And then you get the different outlets, all the dolls' houses and stuff like that. But the Scooby stuff is always separated.
Yeah, I guess the closest they've dived into, I guess, specific and obviously like gender stereotyping isn't something that we tend to do. But I guess they did release those Daphne Barbies, which would have been like the only thing jumping out saying, oh, this is a girl's product. And yet, like every day I'm on eBay trying to find one, but I guess that says more about me than anything.
I think they did that with like McDonald's toys too, is like when they gave out the little toys, it was like, it was the boy toys.
Yeah,
because I remember,
is like, this for a boy or a girl?
Yeah, because I remember like a little kid and I wanted it, and I'd be like, I'd have to go back up and be like, can I get the Scooby? Like, I don't want this one.
Is there anything that you guys would change about your podcast? Anything that you would do differently? JayBee and Millie?
See, I've been trying to get into the realm because I feel like, and this is gonna sound ridiculous because I think every time we've been asked a question, it's been, you know, Ashton this, Ashton that, but it's kind of like when Ashton went on a hiatus, I was like, I don't want to post any Scooby things. It doesn't feel right. I'm scared that because we don't have, you know, his retweet or his quote tweet or like his comment, we almost didn't feel validated. You know, I guess in that realm, it's almost like we're always just going to be like, you know, Ashton's idiot friends that don't know anything about Scooby-Doo, no matter what we did. So we've been trying to like put ourselves out there a bit and legitimize ourselves. So we've been trying to reach out to some of the actors, the voice cast that have like, that have been on like affiliated with Scooby-Doo, but then we're kind of like, is someone that's in a family-friendly, you know, thing that doesn't get the inside joke that it's with Ashton, are they going to willingly come on a show called Smash or Pass? And I'm like, I kind of don't think that they are. Like, so I think more than anything, it's going to be, I don't know if I would have still kept it called Smash or Pass. Maybe I could have come up with something else. But
I'm just remembering an instance when we'd gone shopping in town and you were asking me about the Smash or Pass podcast, and you just literally said Smash or Pass in front of a cashier in a store, and they pulled a bit of a face, and it was like,
yeah, because it was like a young female cashier.
You don't quite understand.
And I literally like looked to you with like a DVD or something and just went Smash or Pass, and then I realized what I'd said. I was like, yeah, maybe let's not say this out loud. I'm surprised we weren't banned from that place.
Alexa, how about you? Is there anything that you would do differently?
Not necessarily. Although I think now that I am working a job that has really flexible hours, so I can go anywhere from like 20 hours a week to like 65 hours a week, that it's maybe a little bit more than I can chew with like all of the website stuff that I wanted to do. So I might have tried to stick just to a podcast.
Mike, how about you? Anything different that you would do?
Other than maybe trying to keep a more consistent schedule, I feel like it was the podcast I wanted when I started it, and it's kind of evolved and grown in the ways that I sort of wanted it to. And it's other than the fact that it hasn't come out in a while, it's kind of exactly what I want it to be. So maybe schedule, maybe some technical stuff, just the behind the scenes stuff. But no, otherwise I'm quite happy with it.
Derek and Shannon, how about you guys? Anything different?
I want to hear your thoughts first.
I want to go with like just the same thing, just keeping a consistent schedule. Because we are like, sometimes we are just so busy, and just even as friends, we don't see each other for like a couple weeks.
We'll go weeks, and
yeah.
she's literally like 5 minutes away from my house.
And it's just like, oh, okay, well, I'll see you in like 2 weeks. And then we're like, okay, well, crap, we have to record. So it's really hard sometimes. And so trying to get like buffer episodes so that, you know, if I don't see him for 2 weeks, the podcast doesn't suffer. More often than that doesn't happen. But, but, you know, just more consistent schedule. And I guess like, if we had $1 billion, just have like a really good like studio, you know, have that like really, really nice setup and good sound, and have like all of that really nice stuff. But
yeah, I definitely agree. Like, honestly, both points that she just said. For one, consistency would be a lot of a, you know, it would be so different because we'd be a lot farther ahead. I think we just talked about this recently because we decided for like our 6th and 7th season where we like set up a whole production schedule of like, this is the day that we're recording this is the day it's going to go out, and everything is like, we have it numbered. Like, it's actually very professionally organized in my opinion, but we have never done anything like that before. So I kind of wish we had done that from the very beginning. Definitely would love to have a better setup, because if you listen to our first 75 episodes, you can tell that there are times where we're just not even recording in the same place. I moved twice in the duration of the podcast being up. At the time I moved in with my boyfriend, and then when he and I split, I moved back home, and the audio quality is just so different based on like where even we were recording. So I do wish there was consistency with that.
Or even just like, there was one episode where as he was editing, we realized that like the second half of our podcast just didn't record at all.
Right. And we were going to go to a library, and we were recording this really echoey room, but that was literally the only option. And we didn't want to push it back because I think we had already pushed it back once. And
it was just awful.
Yeah. But I think all in all, yeah, it's just more consistency with it. And I genuinely really like what we do as it's gone on, kind of like what Mike said, it's progressively become more of what we really want it to be. And that makes us more excited about going into it in the future, because it's a lot more of what we envisioned in the first place.
And I think like you set out a vision for yourself, and then as you start the podcast, you can kind of make it grow into what that vision is. Because at first, you know, none of us have any idea what we're doing. And the more you Google and you learn and you try and error and...
Is my mic on?
Where do you guys record? Alexa?
Right in this room, usually.
Yeah. Is it like soundproofed or?
No, it's not. It's just, luckily it's pretty good for sound quality, but yeah, no, usually just right in here.
Mike, what about you? Do you have a studio or just use a room?
No studio. I moved last year, previously recording in my bedroom where I was living then, now recording in my bedroom where I'm living now. There is a third option. I'm thinking of making a space in my apartment where I will be hopefully doing my recordings. I haven't tested the audio or anything there yet, but yeah, nothing really official, no foam on the walls, just making sure there's not a lot of surfaces for audio to bounce off of, and trying to get noise reducing mics and stuff like that.
JayBee and Millie, how about you guys? Where do you record?
So we just record in this room, although normally we record in the second desk in here because it's like so close to the window. So it's just like a way to stay warm. Because in the UK, it's more often than not, it's very cold. But then there's like a 2-3 week like time period where it's unbearably warm. And obviously UK houses are not built for that. We don't have air conditioning or anything. But we tried to set up a bit differently here because we wanted the Daphne poster to be like our background, but we've just blocked it for like the most part. So we kind of ruined that plan for ourselves. But yeah, just this room.
And Derek and Shannon, do you guys have a studio or just use the room?
We, for the most part, record in my basement. It provides the best quality for what we've been able to find. I would love to set up like a studio kind of spot at some point. That is definitely on our list of to-dos. But I was literally just counting on my hand now a moment ago, like where we've recorded. We recorded here in this room. We've recorded in Shannon's basement. We recorded in a room in Shannon's basement. We had to do it digitally during COVID. We recorded in my apartment like 30 minutes from here. It's kind of bounced around, and that's what kind of adds to the inconsistency. And audio quality is just, we have done it in so many different places, but our favorite is the basement because that's the best that we can do.
We just kind of throw a blanket over the table so that there's no like, I click my pen all day long, so
and trying to reduce all the extra noise.
I feel like JayBee's always moving things away from me when I'm trying to record because I just fidget with anything. So I was on a Zoom call at work and we work together as well. And there was a clip on the table and I was just like, kept nipping the clip together and it was making this awful noise. And he was just like, he just takes things and moves them to the other side of the table. Right. Just like, you don't need that. You can't have that.
So we're done taking notes. Derek will like take my pen and just like put it off to the side. I'm like, okay.
Oh,
I've got a non-clicky pen just for that very reason. So no, you can't record with that one. It needs to be over here.
I just record in my Scooby room. At the moment, I don't have anywhere else to do it. My kids are not typically thrilled that I record so long, so I think the Scooby room is probably the safest place to be. But other than that, does anybody have anything else that they want to talk about?
I guess I wanted to like bounce off of a question that Derek asked somebody that they mentioned in this show. I kind of just wanted to ask what everyone's advice would be to someone if they reached out to them asking what would, I want to start a Scooby-Doo podcast. What's your advice on that?
Don't be precious. Give yourself permission to fail because you're only going to learn from any mistakes that you make. You're going to release something and be like, I really hate the audio on that. And so you make corrections on your next thing. It's a process. It's an evolution. Try and find an interesting topic or an interesting take on a topic. It's really, really, really hard. Take it from somebody who has a movie podcast with his roommate, of which there are like millions. To sort of create your own sort of footprint or plant your flag in that space is really, really tough. So the more unique you are, the better chance you have of sort of gathering an audience around you. Do your research, familiarize yourself with your tech. Don't overreach or overstep, like start small, be comfortable with starting small. And familiarize yourself with social media and like just try and pace yourself and create a presence that people can identify. And that's all I can think about off the top of my head.
I do have a couple of things. Like Mike said, to create your own footprint, you need to find something different, something that's going to set you apart from everybody else. Because if you're doing what everyone else is doing, it's just going to be the same thing. So you have to find something that's going to make your podcast different. And the other thing is to interact with people on social media. If somebody makes a comment, respond to it. people want to know that you're listening to what they're saying, and then they'll listen to what you're saying, if that makes sense.
It's also really good advice to, if you're doing a podcast, you're probably listening to podcasts. What do you hate about the podcasts you listen to? Or what has made you stop listening to podcasts that you listen to, and use that as sort of your guideline. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to eat a sandwich in front of my microphone because it drives me insane to hear somebody do that. Or I'm not going to have somebody say something, stop the thought, go back, completely restate the thought, because what you're doing is you're doing it so that you can get a clean edit, but then you don't go in and you don't edit out that initial thing. So it's just, you're wasting people's time. People, they're listening to these things on their commutes, or while they're cleaning or doing whatever they're doing, jogging, whatever. Like, respect other people's time and what really annoys you, and try really hard not to do that.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with everybody's comments about like wanting to be unique and set yourself apart, because I don't want to listen to 5 different podcasts that are all reviewing the same thing and they pretty much all have the same opinion. They're not adding anything that's like unique from each other. So like, why don't I just listen to one and kind of save myself that time? And like what Mike just said, plan ahead on burnout, and we actively randomize what we watch and jump from series to series because we don't want to get bored with what we're doing. That would just be the worst. We have done it already. We have gotten bored a few times and we are like needing a break, and that's what you kind of have to plan ahead for too. Do you have anything to add?
Love what you're doing, and if you don't like what you're doing, it's your podcast. You can change it, you can edit it however you want. If you're doing it with somebody else, constant communication. Biggest thing is I'll always tell Derek, how can I help? Because he does most of the work. And it's, how can I help? What can I do? Can I do this? Do you need help doing that? And then even just like, hey, where he does most of the work. So sometimes I feel like I can't voice my opinion. He's never made me feel that way, but but it's, where I just like, hey, I really like this segment and I kind of want to head that one, or what we're doing here, I don't really like. Can we kind of cut back on that and maybe take it out completely? Or, just something like that. At the end of the day, it's your podcast. And although you are trying to get people to listen, if you hate what you're doing, you're not going to want to do it.
Yeah. Alexa, do you have any advice?
I think first, just plan ahead for quality and invest in a good mic right off the bat. That's going to help from step 1 immediately. And then also just maybe take the time to write out an outline. If you want to have an intro or an outro, like maybe script it. If you want to have like intro music, take the time to really find one that fits with where you want your show to go. If you want to add clips from something, or, just really just plan.
Anything that you guys can add to that, JayBee and Millie?
Oh gosh, I don't think so at this point. I think we're perhaps a bit too new to like give advice on podcasting, but I guess in terms of tackling, burnout and boredom, and I guess the same rule can apply. I guess because we also knew we've not experienced any boredom with that yet, but I suppose just be true to yourself and your own opinions. And it's like what they were saying. It's so boring to listen to something and say, one person's like, I think this movie is good for these reasons. Yeah, I agree. And then it's just them recycling everything you're saying, like over and just
you say
different
that,
ways to say things.
Like, you say that you don't want everyone to agree, but there's one episode where it's like, we need to redo this. Like, I'm not happy that you disagreed with me.
I was scared because I almost feel like whenever I say something different to Ashton, I've got it wrong. So it was in which one was it? It was an Abracadabra Do, and I was like, at the end of it, I was like, okay, so I'm gonna smash Abracadabra Do, and you then passed it, and then smash past it, And I was like, oh my gosh, I've got this wrong. Like I've done it wrong. I'm not, you know what I mean? I've missed the mark here somehow, because that was almost like the deciding vote. But an episode that I regret so much is just the ending of Monster of Mexico, because I love it. It's got its problems. I think it's quite insensitive for some parts, and it's very pointless. It goes off on mad tangents on like musical montages that don't really make sense. For all purposes, it's probably the stupidest movie that we've reviewed, and yet I love it. I'm always tempted to watch it. I could watch it like every night of the week. I don't know why, I just could, but I definitely passed it on the show because I just didn't want, like, because everyone was just slating it for like the whole podcast, that I was like, there's no way that I can like smash this one up and like it you know, sound credible. But definitely keep true to your own opinions, because even if everyone in the audience disagrees with you, they're gonna back someone else on that show, and as long as they're fully supporting someone on the show, it'll keep them invested all throughout.
With that, me and Derek kind of do the same thing, where he'll love something and then I'll hate it, and he'll be like, well, you're wrong, but that's okay.
That is so true. We reviewed Aloha Scooby-Doo, and I passed that movie, and he was like, no, that's wrong. You can't pass that. When we finished all these movies, we're going to go back and we're going to redo this episode.
10 years later, where are they now?
We're going to revisit it as soon as we're finished, and you're going to say that that's a smash. And I was like, I don't think I am.
We're going to go to Hawaii. We're going to go to Hawaii and watch it, and you'll be in the zone. You'll be in the zone. Trust me, it will happen.
Two examples I can think of, like, based on that, was like, one is that Shannon hates Roby from the Shaggy and Scooby-Doo Get a Clue series. I love him. Like, he's up there, honestly, on some of my favorite characters, because I think he's just so stupid. But
that's why I hate him.
Yeah. Like, also, our most recent review, when we reviewed Zombie Island, our friend Lexi was really watching it kind of from the perspective of like never seen it, is just watching it as a movie, and they didn't think it was all that great, while Shannon and I are just, you know, loving it because everybody loves Zombie Island. But so like we even like looked at Lexi and we're like, oh, you're not thinking it's as amazing as us? Why did we even invite you? Like it was you don't agree with me?
Like, you're wrong. I'm sorry, you're gonna have to go now.
If I could throw out one more thing, it's advice that I've given to a lot of people in a lot of different fields. Just don't be afraid to ask. Like, whether it's, you know, dealing directly with, you know, your co-hosts or whoever you're doing your podcast with, or whether it's engaging with, you know, media entities or looking for advice or whatever, like, you know, take things as far as you can with whatever you have, but nothing ventured, nothing gained, right? Like, the worst someone can say to you is no. And you never know kind of how far you can get just very politely asking to answer your question or get something that, you know, you need, or a connection that you want, or whatever it is. And a lot of people have trouble. I had trouble wrapping my head around that years ago. There was a comic book creator, favorite comic book creators interview for my online magazine, and the guy who was doing my web design was like, well, why don't you get him? And I'm like, well, I can't get him. Like, what? I can't just phone DC Comics and be like, hey, I want to talk to this guy. And he's like, actually, Mike, I think that's exactly how it works. And so I phoned DC Comics, and DC Comics was like, we'll give you his phone number. And I was like, that.
Yeah. Wow.
At the time, that was just not something that I was kind of used to. And I still meet people today who are, you know, with that mindset. And I think it's a valuable thing to sort of take to heart.
Yeah, it's definitely, you know, to put yourself out there to do something like this can be hard. But if you're doing something that you enjoy, people will enjoy it too. You just have to love what you're doing. If you're not happy with what you're doing and you're just doing things to please other people, it's not going to work.
That's true. Like Mike said quite early on, like, you know, it's not that we do this as a job. We don't do this to get paid. It's not that we're having to be like, oh, well, I need to think about what content goes out to maximize views, to maximize money, to maximize profits. It's, you're doing it because it's what you enjoy. You're already taking so much time out of your very busy like life. You don't want to be taking that time to do something that you're not enjoying.
I'm convinced it's all internet wizard magic, because when I put a concerted effort into like boosting SEO and making sure that there's regular posts on the social media and I've got regular content coming out, I see nothing from that. And then I go on hiatus for 4 months and I experience the best numbers I've ever had. So don't do anything and see results. Do a whole bunch of stuff and see nothing. So internet wizard magic.
And it's funny because like I didn't really know if anyone was listening to our podcast because we didn't really have like a good way to track our numbers. And it wasn't until we went on our hiatus and people like messaged us like, hey, are you guys okay? Like, what's going on? And I was like, wow, like people listen.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, thank you guys for joining me. And before we go, I want you guys to let everybody know where we can find you on social media. So Derek and Shannon, we'll start with you.
Okay. If you want to follow the podcast itself, you can go on Facebook or Instagram at That Groovy Scoobcast or Twitter at Groovy Scoobcast. If you want to find me, I'm on Instagram and Twitter at Derek T. Queen or at Do Central on Instagram.
On Instagram, I'm on there as Shanny with, I think it's 3 N's now because my 2 N's got shut down. So SHANNNY892. And then our podcast, did you say our website?
Oh, I mean, yeah, thatgroovyscoobcast.com, or you can email us at thatgroovyscoobcast@gmail.com.
Alexa?
If you want to listen to the podcast, you can find the Unmasked History of Scooby-Doo on pretty much any platform that you listen to podcasts. Or you can follow me on Twitter at UnmaskedSD, Instagram at UnmaskedSDPodcast, or at UnmaskedSDPodcast.com.
JayBee and Millie?
So we're on YouTube, JayBee and Millie. There's a Smash Up House playlist on there and a Scooby-Doo videos playlist. And on anywhere else in the internet, you know, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, we're at JMillieVids. And that's pretty much it.
Mike?
The podcast is available ScoobyDooCast.com or any podcatcher or podcast provider like Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whatever. Social media generally at ScoobyDooCast. I think at ScoobyDooCast is Twitter, and I might be a podcast named Scooby-Doo on Instagram and also on Facebook. So.
And I'm Nikki Blake. You can find all of my links on ScoobyAddicts.com. Thank you so much for joining us for another Scooby panel. Some of you may be wondering why Wendy and Cameron were not on this panel. I wanted to give podcast hosts a platform to talk about their podcasts and the work that goes into them. It's a lot of work to create a podcast or even a web series, a piece of art, a website. Wendy and Cameron are the best co-hosts that I could ever imagine having on these panels. They're both very knowledgeable about Scooby-Doo and the franchise, and I could talk to them both for hours upon hours. They are not just my co-hosts, and thanks to Scooby-Doo, we've created an amazing friendship. And never fear, they will be back next time for another awesome panel. Thank you for tuning in to another Scooby panel. I'm Nikki Blake from ScoobyAddicts.com. If you like these panels, please subscribe to my channel for more great discussions. A very special thank you to Derek Queen and Shannon Downey from That Groovy Scoobcast, Alexa LAWLOR from the Unmasked History of Scooby-Doo Podcast, JayBee and Millie from Smash or Pass, and Mike JOZIC from a podcast named Scooby-Doo. Scooby and Shaggy were voiced by Scott Innes. Check out Scott's website, onescottshop.com. Scooby Panel is available in podcast form on most podcast platforms, or as a web series on YouTube. If you would like to support the Scooby Panel, please go to support.ScoobyAddicts.com. Scooby Addicts art by Will Davenport, video editing by Nikki Blake, music composed and performed by Bovine Nightmares. Please join us next time for our discussion on the weird things in Scooby-Doo.